This is a reflection on the expulsion of Ugandan Asians by Idi Amin in 1972. Like me, about 15% of refugees went to RAF Stradishall when they first arrived. We'll go through the journey from South Asia to UK, focusing on overall history as well as some specifics in relation to Stradishall Camp. In the late 19th century, with Queen Victoria as Empress of India, it was decided to open up the landlocked, resource-rich and mining areas in British East Africa to transport copper, for example. The 600-mile line connected the port town of Mombasa with Port Florence, now known as Kisumu, on the shores of Lake Victoria, and then via steamer to other ports on Lake Victoria. The 32,000 workers were South Asian, particularly the Punjabis and Gujaratis, because they were known to have the experience and ability to construct railways. There was a lot of opposition in London. It was dubbed the lunatic line because of the expense and the hazards of working in areas with high risk of disease and attacks from wildlife. The lines of Tsavo, for example, killed almost 100 workers. Overall, nearly 2,500 died and almost 6,500 were severely injured. Construction commenced in 1896 and was completed by 1901. Many of the workers stayed on in Uganda and Kenya. In addition to those that stayed, more South Asian families migrated to Uganda. The British government also encouraged others to move to work as teachers and clerical staff using the Uganda Protectorate Agency in India. The community settled very well, making it their home country, with many taking up Ugandan citizenship. The majority of about 29,000 maintained their affiliation with Britain and remained or converted to British citizenship. The community thrived and provided a lot of economic strength to Uganda. However, this success made them a target of resentment and persecution. Idi Amin overthrew Milton Obote in January 1971 whilst he was attending a Commonwealth conference in Singapore. Amin quickly asserted total rule, giving himself titles such as Commander-in-Chief and King of Scotland. On August 1972, he announced the expulsion of all Asians from Uganda. This affected almost 50,000 people, of whom nearly 30,000 were British citizens. They were told to leave their shops and houses unlocked so that the local Ugandans could confiscate property. The families were allowed £50 and one suitcase each. They were given 90 days to leave. Edward Heath was Prime Minister at the time of the expulsion. He received a lot of bad press when he told the country that he was obliged to accommodate its expelled Ugandan Asian British citizens. The Ugandan Resettlement Board, chaired by Sir Charles Cunningham, was set up on the 23rd of August 1972. Members included Mr. Tom Critchley as director and various members from central and local government, Council of Churches and the WRVS. Mr. Praful Patel was there as representative of the Asian community. The board was dissolved on 31st of January 1974, having spent just over £6 million to accommodate these expellees. Within 6 weeks of the announcement, 16 camps were made ready to receive the 30,000 displaced people, becoming important stopgaps for displaced families to start their new life in the UK. Most chosen sites were decommissioned RAF or Armed Forces camps. These had land with houses, canteens, and administration buildings which could be renovated to accommodate the expellees. Kensington Students' Accommodation was the first to receive expellees on 6 September 1972. Stradishall was the largest. West Malling in Kent was the last to close on 15th January 1974. Over 28,000 refugees arrived to the UK, one-third of whom were under the age of 16. Special flights were organised by the Resettlement Board in conjunction with the airlines such as BOAC. 2 or 3 special flights landed every day at Stansted Airport from the 18th of September. The Coordinating Committee for the Welfare of Evacuees from Uganda was also set up. It oversaw 60 odd different voluntary organisations using appointed liaison officers. They coordinated the incredible work of the volunteers who were critical in delivering the resettlement road. On arrival at the airport, the expellees were met by members of the WRVS, Red Cross, St John's Ambulance Brigade, and members of the Asian community. Of the 28,608, 21,987 Asians required the use of camp. The rest made their own arrangements. RAF Stradishall, a decommissioned Air Force base, was hastily recommissioned as a holding camp for all the arrivees. It was opened on 18 September 1972 and was the biggest of the 16 camps to provide accommodation and facilities. Its administrator was Group Captain Frederick Rothwell. He was sent 6 Army recruits to help with the sorting and heavy work. The WRVS, alongside huge numbers of volunteers, had the responsibility of preparing the accommodation and, with the help of Hadley Youth Group, prepared the camp's medical centre. The camp, including hangars, barracks, general buildings, canteens, and former officers and ranks houses, were refurbished and reconnected to water, electricity, and gas within weeks. The camp was in use for 6 months between 18 September 1972 and 23rd of March 1973. Total of 3,294 expellees, 15% of all those going to the 16 camps, passed through RAF Stradishall. Their stay ranged between 2 weeks and many months. On 18 September 1972, half of the 193 expellees to arrive on the first special flight at Stansted Airport were sent to RAF Stradishall. To settle in, they were registered at the admin block, completed medicals, were given information and offered warm clothing to combat the British autumn climate. Whilst the first few were accommodated into refurbished houses, many families arriving later shared a hangar with others, each cordoned off by screens to provide some degree of privacy. A total of 2,000 expellees were expected to be resident on any one day at Stradishall. Staff were tasked to provide 3 meals a day for every person. This was initially a difficult task as they had limited prior knowledge about the expellees' religious dietary requirements. Over time, they were supported by Asian women who helped to buy ingredients and prepare dishes. With the hard work, there were also many organised social events. Outings, parties and traditional Indian dancing, as well as celebrations for Diwali, Guy Fawkes Night and Christmas were enjoyed by all. It helped keep up the spirits of everyone involved in and around the camps. It helped the expellees to adapt and the locals to engage with these new peoples. Many staff were seconded to Stradishall. With their volunteers, they contributed to the successful running of the camp and provided the expellees with advice about employment, housing, and transport. Medical staff were in great demand, especially as any disabled or ill Asians coming to the country were sent directly to Stradishall as the closest camp to Stansted. 4 local doctors from Wickenbrook and Clare carried much of the load, holding 12-hour-long daily surgeries on site, whilst being supported by their family members for collecting prescriptions. 4 teachers and headmaster Mr. Roger Gillingham were appointed by the Education Authority to run a school. Overall 461 pupils were taught at the camp school before being transferred to local schools and colleges. The children were provided with education towards qualifications and simply for learning English. An integral part of the volunteering effort, Reverend Bill Davis, Vicar of Wickenbrook, learned to speak Hindi when he was stationed in India during the Second World War. He helped to translate and communicate with refugees who did not speak English. Becoming entertainment and sports officer, he set up an extensive entertainment program, arranged visits to shows, outings to football games, and organised 85 local families to invite the refugees to their homes for tea each weekend. Staff also set up a playgroup for the youngest children. Scoutmaster Trevor Foreman was very proud to have boys from the camp join his pack at Cowley. The unwavering support of many other volunteers was also critical to the running of the camp and well-being of those staying there. Members of the Women's Institute sorted through mountains of donated clothes into piles for men, women and children. Penny Bayman allocated houses to new arrivals and welcomed buses of arrivals day or night. Sarah Dennis and her friends made beds for new arrivals each day as people came and went. Local villagers, Mrs. Newman and Mrs. Rolfe, laid on food and drinks for parties and activities such as basket weaving and other craft activities. The Resettlement Board, directed by Tom Critchley, worked tirelessly to find housing and jobs for the refugees across Britain. By summer of 1973, 95% of expellees were living in the community. 2,300 houses were made available by local authorities, and more than 1,500 were used to provide accommodation for 7,300 people by July 73. There were 2,284 offers of private accommodation. Of these, 750 were taken up on behalf of about 2,300 Ugandan Asians. The others were deemed to be in the wrong areas. 6,000 Asians made their own arrangements, with 40% heading to London. The rest went to over 350 different areas of England, Scotland and Wales. Approximately 1,200 people chose to emigrate out of the UK. Nearby Haverhill allocated 10 houses. Bury St Edmunds provided 3. Though there was a great demand from local families waiting to be housed, it was decided that the needs of these people from Uganda was greater. To support their new lives, 5,700 jobs were made available to the expelled community across the country, although not all were taken up. Fortunately, 75% of people wanting a job quickly found one. Councillor Charles Swift endured abuse and personal attacks for providing housing in Peterborough. Despite this, with the support of his secretary Margaret Lane and local businesses, they found, renovated and offered 50 houses to the refugees. Councillor Swift's efforts were supported by local companies such as Perkins Engines to provide jobs. Many of these displaced families were already successful in enterprise and education in Uganda. They had the drive to rise to the new challenge of restarting and investing themselves into the British community. Despite legally being British citizens, there was a significant wave of opposition to the admission of and money spent on these 28,000 refugees. At the end of December 1974, just over £7 million was spent on all of these expellees from Uganda. In the first year following expulsion alone, 85% of those registering for work were or were soon to be in employment and contributing to the British economy. By December 2022, it's been estimated that the expelled Ugandan Asian community had contributed £5 billion to the UK economy. The refugees and their children have thrived, becoming an integral part of British community, including in business development, such as Euro car parks, eminent doctors at university hospitals, and working in the UK Parliament and the House of Lords. As a community of expellees, we're indebted to the British government and Mr. Ted Heath, who was Prime Minister at the time of our expulsion, also Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and all the seconded staff and numerous volunteers who helped smooth out the turmoil that beset everyone that had to leave quickly from Uganda. Without their help, things could not have turned out as well as they have for this community. The commemoration specifically for Stradishall was unveiled in April 2025 and was organised and supported by all those listed on this slide. There are many places you can find more information. These are just a few of the links that you might find worth looking at for further information about this expelled community of Ugandan Asians. Thank you for listening.